Why does there have to be human suffering? Hi, I'm Phil. Welcome to this Power Shout message about human suffering and what can we learn from it. Within the past month, I've played a role in 3 funeral services. 2 of them were for 85-year-old men, happily married for over 60 years each, 4 children each, pillars in the community, youth sports, guys you looked up to. One of them was my dad. And I spoke at these funerals, and I was very honored to do so and talk about their legacy and their faith in Jesus. But the third one wasn't for an 85-year-old man. It was for a 5-month-old baby girl. This little angel was born to 2 young parents, and both the families were helping these 2 young people to raise this child. So for 5 months, this little girl was happy, healthy, and was a great unifier in these 2 families. But suddenly, sudden infant death syndrome took her life, and it was devastating. And a few days later, my dear friend, one of the grandparents, asked me if I would preside over the funeral service, and I was happy to. But it made me think, what do I say? This is tremendous human suffering. How do we deal with this? How can I convey this? And so I thought it was important to take this subject head on. And so I talked, first of all, about perspective. So think about perspective. We have a cat. His name's Calvin. And he roams about, 1 foot off the ground, and he sees whatever he sees, except when he climbs up on the table, and that irritates me, but my wife thinks it's cute. But Calvin has his perspective, and Maverick's our dog, and he stands a little taller, and he has a little more of a wider view than Calvin does. And I'm 6 feet tall, and I can see even further out than our 2 animals can. But God Almighty sits in heaven, and he has an eternal divine perspective on humanity. And he sees things that we could never see, understands things that we will never understand until we get there. Now, let's talk about this divine perspective, and let's read from Isaiah 55, first of all. In verse 8 and 9, it says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." So, right off the bat, we see God has this eternal divine perspective. We don't. And in fact, in 1 Corinthians 13, it says that right now, we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. It says, now we know in part, but then we will know even as we are known. To see through a glass darkly means it's dirty, it's smudged, it's covered. We really can't see what's going on the other side. We know that it's out there. We know that maybe it's outside and we're inside, but we can't really make it out. Who's out there? What time of day is it? Etc. That's what our view of heaven is like. We know it's there, but we don't really fully see it or understand it. But then it goes on to say that one day when we join heaven, we will know even as we are known. And it's at that time that we'll know exactly the plan, will, and purposes of God and why he did what he did, including taking a 5-month-old baby home to him. We don't understand it right now. We won't understand it. And I think the best thing we can do is not even try to understand it, but just accept it and trust God. And that leads me to my second point. What if we lived in a world that was devoid of pain and suffering? Everyone was happy, everyone was healthy, everyone had cars to drive, food on their table, their kids were well educated, etc. How long would that really last? Until people started to say, well, I know I have 2 cars in my driveway, but they're not as nice as those cars over there. And my kids are smart kids, but they're not as smart as those kids, and etc. How long until we didn't even appreciate seemingly perfection? How long? I say that we live in an imperfect world because it makes us reach for God when things aren't going well. We turn to God in times of suffering and times we don't understand. Now, some people will turn their back on God during those times. But I'd like to think that you and I will turn towards God when we don't understand, when we see suffering, when it really impacts us. We will turn to God and embrace him. And I do want you to know that someday there will be perfection for everyone. And we can read about that in Revelation 21 as I close. Verses 3 to 5 say that God's dwelling is with humanity, and he will live with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and will be their God. and he will wipe away, watch this, every tear from their eyes. Death will no longer exist. Grief, crying, and pain will exist no longer. There will be a time for perfection, and we will appreciate it fully because we will be in the presence of God. Right now, we're not in the presence of God. We would not appreciate perfection right now. But someday we will in the presence of God, and we will understand everything. We will understand why things happen that we don't agree with. So I say for now, we accept them. We learn what we can from them, and we continue to cling to God. And this is my response to what do we do in the midst of human suffering. There's been a Power Shout message. We have many more messages on our website, philhenrypowergospel.org. We have a YouTube channel. And for daily inspiration, we have Instagram and Facebook posts and Twitter account. So I hope you'll find us, like us, follow us. And until next time, may God bless you and empower you.